Hello, hello. Welcome to Confidence Through Cabaret, the podcast. I'm Heather Jean, your host, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. We are talking on this podcast all things confidence. So whether that's your personal life, work life, or stage life, or wherever you want to grow confidence, then we look at different topics that inspire or inform confidence. And today, I'm so excited to be joined by Emmy Petersson, the mid-career, I should say, not midlife necessarily, mid-career coach, helping career professionals to be able to navigate any change or any growth or transition or find what they want to do and change to that. And we're going to be talking a lot about, the confidence to back yourself and make those transitions that we all at some point in our life need to be making. So if you have a fear of maybe feeling silly or you have a fear of failure, we're going to talk about that. And we are going to be, really thinking about how you can uplift your confidence in your career, whether that's in your own business or whether that's in a full-time job or a bit of a mix. So please welcome the wonderful Emmy Petersson. Hello.
Hi, hello, how are you?
I'm so well. How are you?
Yeah, great, thank you. Great.
Good. Now your business is bridge coaching.
Yeah, the bridge coaching, that's right.
Bridge
Yeah.
coaching. Lovely. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you came to that. And because you've been through a transition as well in your career, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've been in the coaching space since 2013 now, and I actually found career coaching way back then because I was looking for a career coach for me. I was feeling a bit unfulfilled. I wasn't really sure what to do next. So I started to look for coaching opportunities and funnily enough found a school that taught coaching. And I was like, wow, this is something you can actually do for work. And for many years, I did coaching part-time. And recently I've stepped into full-time coaching, which is my true passion. And yeah, like exactly like you said in the intro, I get to help people who are mid-career, typically 35 to 45, sometimes late 40s, just navigate that time and go, what the heck do I do now?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I said midlife, and often that those ages that you're talking about are kind of that
Mm,
midlife in context of career.
mm,
But it's interesting to me, in when I've been working with corporations, which was predominant. I mean, I've had my own career coaching business for over 26 years now, but what I found right before COVID was that mid-career started to happen younger.
mm. Yeah,
Because,
I agree.
millennials, a whole different generation than Gen X, and a whole different generation again to Gen Z or Gen Z, depending where you're from. And I think that kind of different way of looking at things, a lot
Mm,
of young people don't necessarily know what they're getting into, and then when they figure it out, they go, "Aha, I need a
mm.
career change." And I think you're only in your 20s or early 30s. What is happening?
I know, right?
So
Yeah,
that
look, it's it's
mid-career is
it's such
different.
an interesting thing, career, and I think we're living in a time now, obviously post-COVID, we're seeing this new normal, we're seeing this new level of flexibility in some industries, and I think it's led a lot of people, mid-career or not, to really think about what they want to do, how they want to work, what leaders they want to have around them, and beyond that, like what do we do want to do outside of work? And career coaching is interesting because it's obviously about building your career, your skills, and your path and setting goals. But it's also being very clear on what we don't want and what we want to make room for outside of our work. So I find a really interesting part of goal setting for careers is to also have a really clear view on what you're looking for outside of your working life. Yeah, and absolutely, like you're describing that kind of people who are quite young still who are getting into jobs and just starting to really evaluate like, oh, I went to uni to study this thing, I've done it for a few years, it's actually not quite what I thought or what I wanted, or my parents said I should explore this area and it's not really for me. And I guess where mid-career coaching is really fascinating is the people who might have gone down that path, they're really good at it, the passion, the laughter, the thing has left, and now they're left with the feeling that they don't really know what to do instead because they've been doing it for so long. And that can be a really tricky space to get out of without some help from someone.
Yeah, and I guess it depends where you live, because I'm from Canada. So when we go to university, we don't declare a major until 2 years into a 4-year
Mm,
baccalaureate. So and our whole degree cannot be based around that subject.
mm,
So you have a context for your subject, and sometimes you find that you took a course and you ended up loving it, and off you go in
mm,
that direction. Where I'm in the UK right now, and I know you're in Australia, so it'd be interesting to
mm,
see what the difference is. In the UK, it's a very exam-based system, and you take exams when you're 16, you take exams when you're 18, and whatever you've done well in is what you continue into. So I work with
mm.
a lot of people in, let's say accountants, for example, is a very common one, where they were good at maths and then that continued, and then
Yeah.
they became an accountant. Now they have they have several children and a mortgage and all of
Mm,
these bills. And then how do you navigate to come out of that?
mm. That's a great question. And I mean, yes, the school systems are different. I'm originally from Sweden, which is where I went to uni, and lived up until I was 19. And then I've moved and traveled a lot before I ended up in Australia 12 years ago. But I do think it doesn't matter so much where you've gone to school, because I think that problem, I'm starting to see it pop up, because I have clients globally, and it's quite interesting. I'm starting to see the same kind of theme that you described come up in a lot of different age groups. But I think, to answer your question, I think it's really important for people who are starting to feel, and by the time someone verbalizes that they're not quite happy or it doesn't sit quite right, they've usually thought about it internally and almost decided that they've got to do something about it. So the internal dialogue has probably been going on for, in some cases, for years, by the time they come and have a discovery call or something with someone like you or me, where they're like, okay, where do I go now, and where do I start? And yeah, and that's essentially what I really love about doing some really, because it's not a quick fix coaching thing, right? You're mid-career, you're midlife, perhaps. I mean, I'm 40 now. I recently went through a big transition out of sales and marketing to fully focus on coaching. And as much as I've enjoyed having that presence in the corporate world and understanding what a lot of my clients go through, it's really important sometimes to make those pivot decisions and to back yourself, which is really what the confidence piece is all about. Yes, you might still not be successful straight away. It might take longer than you think. It might not be that famous staircase of beautiful, I'll take this step and then it'll all work out. It's that whole thing, success and failure is a myriad of ups and downs. And I think being able to back yourself, though, and develop the skill to do that, and have that confidence, even when things don't go to plan, is a true life skill that we sometimes lose with age. Kids are so brave, teenagers can be so brave, and then at some point, many of us lose that willingness to fall, or the willingness to risk the fall. And that's when we stop taking chances, and that's also when we get really stuck, or at least I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think so. My role model, my father went back to university in his 40s, which was
Mm.
unheard of. Like, you just did not do that. There was no distance learning. There was no, you have to quit your job and go to university full time.
Wow, that's great. What
It's
a
it's
step.
crazy. And so they remortgaged the house and tightened all the purse strings to completely change career. And there was nobody. He was 25 years older than everybody else on campus. He was
Mm,
the same age as some of the professors. So what was interesting about that was that he took that risk of
mm,
mortgaging the house and putting himself in real financial jeopardy. He had to work night jobs and things to
mm,
make ends meet. um, and I think it's quite a position of privilege to be able to do that, because a lot of people wouldn't either want to take that risk or just can't take that risk. So
mm.
what happens if somebody comes to you and they're in that position where they, for whatever reason, feel unable to take that risk? Is there a way through anyway to
Yeah.
deal with it?
Absolutely, and I think this is the ethical piece that's really important when you're working with a coach. Like, as a coach, you have to provide healthy and sustainable advice, like, obviously you're there to guide the person's own thinking. You're not there to tell them what to do. And at the same time, you have to be really mindful. So in my coaching, I often introduce a conversation around finance, simply for the reason that, first of all, coaching, as you know, is completely confidential. So nothing leaves that room anyway. But the clarity around what's your financial situation, because that is, and also your obligations to other people around you. But I guess I have two different answers to that question. So if someone comes to me and they're in that situation, similar to your dad, I would first of all say, like, are the other people in your life on board with the change that this is going to mean? Is your partner, is your kids, or whatever else you've got going on in the world, is everyone rallying around and understanding this decision that you're wanting to make? Sometimes the answer to that is yes. And if people are willing to do what your family went through, and I trust your dad was a lot happier for it, even if it was a struggle for him, then, seeing someone, happier in their life, absolutely. The other thing, which is the more common approach for a lot of people, is either what I call the soft landing job. So the soft landing job is most important for someone who might be in a very toxic or a very uncomfortable situation at work, where they simply have to go, but they don't know, they can't do the full move yet, or they can only kind of partially do the move. So a soft landing job can be a really good way to gather your strength, get your confidence back, catch a breather. So it could be, I often talk about jobs that are great or brilliant, like your best ideal job ever. The things that are okay, which are like, yeah, I can do it for a while, but it's not my dream, but it's also not harmful to me. And then there are the jobs that are not okay, which is the third category, which is essentially jobs that you would never do, or companies whose values you just can't stand for, and therefore you'd never work for them. So quite often when people come to me, especially if they're in the third category, so they're not well, they're not doing okay, and they need to leave for whatever reason, then we start exploring the great category and the good category and try to nudge them across to a space that is safe, a little bit more comfortable, where they can regain their strength and confidence and build towards the ultimate end goal. Because let's face it, it's kind of like when we're injured, we can't train for an Olympics. When we're injured, we need to recover, we need to regain our strength. And for some people, we need that. And we were chatting before about, there are other circumstances in our lives too, not just our work, that we need to take into account. So the soft landing job can be a really helpful strategy for people who need a segue or need a stepping stone.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. And I think, for some people, that's the bit that gives them the opportunity to see whether this is for them, or whether, get a little bit of a taster. And I'm thinking about, a lot of people listening to this podcast will have their own business, whether that's a side business and then they have a full-time job, or whether, and they maybe want to transfer into that full-time of their own job. I mean, the whole Great Resignation, as it's being called, is a whole. I mean, it's a minefield, because I had a business for 25 years before I started online, and it is not the same. Like, and yet they were both businesses, right? I didn't have like a secure paycheck. I wasn't, that had been a very long time since I'd worked for another company full time, but it is very different being online. And people, they hear about, having a 10K month and having, all of this freedom, and having all of these things are very attractive, perhaps. But the reality is very different when you get into it, because you're exposed in very different ways. And I'll give you an example, Emmy, and then I'd love for you to kind of share your experience. For me, being in the corporate world and being a training consultant and coach for businesses was very masculine energy, right? It's doing, driving, competing, results, all those kind of words. And that suited me. And then COVID hit, and then I had to face all of the feminine energy of creativity and intuition and things like copywriting and putting yourself out there in a very different way than you do in what I call the corporate uniform, where we're covered with, what we're there to do and how we're meant to look and all of those things. And it's very, very different when all those rules are gone and you have an online business. Have you noticed that kind of difference either for yourself or in your clients?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a great conversation. I haven't had this exact chat with someone, so I'm really glad you're bringing it up. I do think people who have awareness around that masculine, feminine, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners do, but I think a lot of people don't really have language around that or are not able to label different types of activities, and which kind of bucket they would go into, and also why you might be feeling drained by certain things or out of your depth with certain things. I think for me, I don't mind the blend between the two in running your own business. I think I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I was one of those kids who sold, lemonade stalls and did the things and, sold Christmas magazines and all that kind of stuff back home. So I always had a little hustle going, like a side hustle going. So I was always very creative and looking for business ideas. And I like that creative element, but I do agree with you. I think the biggest shift is probably that the definition of corporate, like what does corporate look like, sound like? Because we're hearing all these things now about like empathy and, rather than talking about employee retention, which is still a language we especially in our fields hear a lot. It's not so much about retention anymore. It's about the feminine side of that, which is how much do you care? How do you show that you care? What does flexibility look like? And then on the perhaps more masculine energy side, how do you measure that? How do you quantify, like what's the output from flexibility? So I think we're living at a really interesting time where all that stuff is a little bit muddled. And for all the entrepreneurs out there or people who have a quote unquote day job, but they want to lean into their own business, now is a great time to do that and still have the awareness that you still need structure. Like just because you're no longer working in an office, I have my days when I do like creative time pockets, and then I have times when I need to sit down and do accounts and do this and that. And especially if you're a 1 or 2 man band, you got to wear many hats in your week, and absolutely dip back and forth the things that you're describing. And finally, I think the biggest change is that you're literally working with people from your couch, living room, bed, spare bedroom. For a while, Australia, Melbourne, where I live, had some of the harshest lockdowns in the world, which meant that literally the whole family was in lockdown. Like the kids were at home, the parents were at home, the Wi-Fi was running slow. And I think that muddles those lines a little bit as well. Like, how do you sit and do a really corporate sounding training or meeting when you're actually in your slippers and pajama pants with a nice shirt on? Which was the truth and the reality for a lot of people. And some companies took that and made it a bit playful and, used that in their social media. And a lot of others just kind of, covered up a little bit, which I think, it does interesting things to culture and it does interesting things for people's perceptions. So, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think I purposely don't. I have an office and all the bookcases and all the stuff in the background because I had to run webinars for corporate. I couldn't be on my sofa, not really, because they were all in office spaces, and of
Yeah.
course now they're all at home. It's quite different. My
Yeah.
brand for Confidence Through Cabaret is much more casual and comfy, and let's really get into talking about it. And for corporate clients, that can be a little bit difficult, especially online, because there's
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
there's that distance. And I think I knew where I was in corporate, like I knew how to behave. And then when you go to your own home business or your own home working, then the rules, as you say, are so different now. And I think it's being mindful of that. If you are working in a full-time job, you're upholding the values and the commitments that you have to that employer, and then you've got your own brand values, so there's a real duality there. And I think a lot of people get muddled right there with like, how do I create my own brand that is so different to the corporate, kind of patriarchy rules? And I love what you say about, having structure in your day to say, this day is for my podcast, or this day is for my finances, or this day is for my social media planning. And actually, funny enough, I started that way because that makes sense to me. And and I found for my own personal brand, I didn't enjoy that structure.
Mm.
So I would do, Mondays was for social media. I did schedule the whole week. And I found it just didn't work for me. I liked the more kind of fluid kind of, thing.
Mm.
And which is further evidence that I'm fully unemployable now, in a full-time capacity as we end up becoming. But I think, when you're talking about making transitions, that whole kind of fear of what happens if I do start to, you know, choose my own path, and I might fail, right? This is way safer for me to have a corporate rule to follow or a structure
Mm.
to follow, because I'm less likely to fail, and we're also afraid of failure. So
Oh, massively. Massively.
right? That's why I did the structure. It was like, right, if I do Mondays, then I can tick the box and say I've done all of my social media for the week, and it's
Mm.
and so on. And I found, because it took me a while to get to grips with letting go of that concept of failure.
Mm.
I'm like, okay, I failed today. I fail every single day in
Yeah.
some way, and I'm okay with that, because I've
Yeah.
redefined what failure is. So let me ask you, what is your definition, Emmy, of failure?
Um, that's a really great question. I guess for way of background, I'm a somewhat recovered perfectionist. So I used to have very high and very stringent definitions for myself, not for other people, mostly myself, about, what standards look like. And I remember at school, I used to often, if I didn't get the highest grade, that would feel like failure, or my old definition at the time of failure. And it was funny because my parents were both very accepting and very encouraging. So, my therapist and I have gone down that rabbit hole to find out why that definition was the way it was. But I think it's really interesting. I think failure, I have a complicated relationship with that word as an adult anyway. I think the concept of failing forward is a very helpful one, meaning you're kind of failing / learning forward, right? So you tried something in your business or something else, or you ran a social campaign or something, and it didn't work, or your technology broke down or something, and you learned that, oh dang it, next time I have to practice more, or next time I have to whatever that thing is. So the whole concept of failing forward, I think, is really useful. Or learning. Another great example, when I first started out in coaching, I was focusing a lot on expats, but it was challenging at the time because expats moving countries obviously have a gazillion things that they need to deal with. So I ran quite a few campaigns in my first year of business back in 2012, 2013, focused on expats because as an expat myself, I knew they needed the thing. But the failure / the learning was that to connect with them at the right time was extremely difficult. So the product offering I had at the time was a quote unquote failure because it didn't quite solve the problem there and then, because the people didn't know that they needed it. Now, because luckily I was working with a coach at that time myself, I was able to have healthy language around what the failure / learning actually meant. So I guess my definition is a long-winded way to answer your question. My definition is a learning about what didn't work that time with those resources.
Yeah.
So it's not about you. It's not about anything you did wrong. It's the time and the resources and the where you were at. It's mostly a timing and a resource issue. But I think this is where we go back to confidence, is the fact that to be able to do that and know that it's not you that failed, it's the idea or the creative craft or the project. If you're in corporate, it happens all the time, right? You pitch or deliver something and someone's like, oh, that didn't quite hit the mark. It was either timing or resources. Most often it's very rarely you. And I think that's how I think about it. I am now intrigued to write a blog post and unpack this a little bit more. So I'll let you know how I go with my more tight definition.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's an interesting one, because how we store language is so
Mm.
important, and how we uh, relate our identity to it, I guess.
Yes.
That what you're talking about is that what I did was a failure, not I am a failure. And there's a really strong difference between those. And that is so important how we internalize words like failure. Because to me, failure is not a bad thing. But, you know, like I say, I fail every day in some way, but I don't feel like a failure. I am not a failure. And I think it's an important distinction that you raise there. So, in terms of confidence, let's talk a little bit more about having that confidence to overcome the sense of failure, or to change our definition or association with it, or our beliefs about it, or all those things. Where does confidence come from for you?
I think confidence for me is very rooted in self-esteem, which is the way I see confidence is a lot around my belief in my ability to be able to do something. So you can be a confident speaker, you can be a confident writer, you know, what insert skill here, marketer. You know, I've spent a long time in marketing and sales. For me, when healthy confidence comes from healthy self-esteem, and your self-esteem in my book is really just your relationship and your belief in your own self, your worthiness, your base worthiness factor. So I find that I'm more able personally, and I see it in my clients all the time too, when you have a higher, healthier relationship with yourself, so a higher self-esteem, your confidence becomes easier to have a dialogue around, because your confidence is more about your ability to do the thing, not in who you are, which is the distinction you said before. So for example, I coach a lot of people about job interviews, which is the perfect storm, right? Because like you're nervous, you're online, you know, you've got a whole panel of Zoom faces sitting there looking at you. You got to say the perfect answer. And, you know, so confidence in interviews is much like public speaking. You know, I bet if you put like on the top 10 things people hate or are afraid of, I bet it would be right up there. So I think it's really interesting. Confidence, I think, comes from a belief that I have taken on for a long period of time, which is whatever happens, I can handle it with the right help by my side. And it doesn't mean that I'll do it perfectly. I'll probably, like you say, I fail all the time. I get things wrong all the time, because that's what it's like to be human. But I believe that I can get through the thing. And I think that has always given me a baseline of confidence that I try to lean on when things feel shaky or hard, or I want to cry, or I do cry, you know, because again, we're only human. So that's where confidence comes from me, but it's not an uncomplicated thing, because when we experience certain things, or same for me as a coach, I'm very aware of all this stuff. I still get triggered all the time. You know, that little voice in our head that goes, who the heck do you think you are to be interviewed on a podcast or do this thing? Like, who's going to listen to you? No. Like that voice, we all have it. And I think confidence or self-esteem as well is just the ability to go, thank you, voice. I see where you're coming from, but you're not helpful right now. So thanks for the flag.
I love that. I love that. And I talk about that as the imposter voice. And that is such a great technique, to being able to say, thank you, I'm good, I got this. I was actually a little bit triggered there when you said about whatever happens, I can get through it with support and resources. I'm paraphrasing now, but so I'm right there with you, going, I can get through this. And then you're like, with support or resources. And I was thinking, okay, so my soloist, which is the archetype that I identify most strongly with in my imposter voice, is going, but I don't like to accept help. I don't like help when it's offered. I don't want to ask for help. And there's a whole lot of stuff going on behind that about what will people think, and lots of things. And I am fully in control of that voice now. And I do accept help, but it isn't natural for me. It's not a really strong track record with that. That's just since COVID, because I had to have help. And so it's funny, because we hear those little things, and you said that, and I went, oh, the help and the resources. Oh no, I don't want support. I want to be able to do it all myself, you know. So even with all of the knowledge and all of those things, there are little triggers. And what I love about what you just said is that, you know, when you know those things, then you can say, I got this. I'm okay right now. You're not being helpful. Yeah.
And I'm chuckling because what you're describing right now is pretty much my personal triggers. So when I first took on this belief, I basically had a challenge from one of my own coaches many, many moons ago, who said to me, like, you know, you already are capable of getting through life. You know, you've moved many times, you started your own business, you've done all these things. Like, you're a very capable person. So, you know, you need to learn to believe that you can and that you can get through whatever happens. So I took that belief that I just shared on in 2 stages. The first stage was exactly what you said, which was I choose to believe that I can get through it, you know. But much to your point, I realized that for me, and everyone's different, I realized that if I keep doing that, I'm going to be like the solo mountain climber, right? I'm just going to like, I'll get through it, storms, things, you know, no, whatever, get the Sherpas out of the way. I can do this by myself, until you realize that the second part of the belief is just as important as the belief in self, which is accepting help is vital. We've seen it in COVID. We've seen it in other times too. Like, you know, most people I know speak to a coach or a counselor or a therapist or something several times in their lifetime. And we need it, right? Because sometimes when things aren't working or we're soldiering on, we have the blinders up so high that we can't see the thing that someone could help us with that could remove most of the stuff we're going through or help us manage it. So I chuckle because I totally like you, and it still triggers me at times today, but I just choose to take the belief on fully and believe it 99% of the time. And then there's that one time where my inner voice is like, meh, you can do it yourself. You don't have to ask for help. No, 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 no. So yeah, rest assured, I totally get where you're coming from. And that's why I had to do the 2-step approach. I'm like, I'm not ready for the full thing quite yet. I'll start with half.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, my way around that is to just not overthink it. It's just, I don't know how to
Yeah.
do this, and I don't know how to find out how to do this. Time
Mhm.
to ask for help. And if I pause at that moment, then I will talk myself out of it, and I'll find something else to do, and I'll procrastinate and do all of those things. So as soon as I hit that bit of how do I do this? I don't know. How do I
Yeah.
find out? I don't know. Time to ask for help.
Yeah.
It might, that inner voice doesn't get a chance
Mm.
to jump in there. That's just my I just ignore all of the rest. So I love your two step approach. You know, that asking for help or accepting help is vital. And I think, you know, the mountain climber with the Sherpas is a great example of that.
Yeah.
It's the mountain climber that gets all the glory. And look, they did all this by themselves. You know, we just had the Olympics this year, and we watch all that, and aren't they amazing? There is a full team behind them. You know.
100%. 100%. And it's the team behind that notices that if you run for another half a mile on that ankle, you're going to get really hurt. Or, you know, like, it's the team around us that can see the things that we can't. And to tie it back slightly to career transitions as well, I go through a process with a lot of clients where we actually look for feedback, not just in their workplace, but in their personal life. So I ask them to go and get feedback on a couple of particular areas from friends, from family, from people who are not part of their working world, because those people are often the ones that can give us a lot of help and support with our career transition without us realizing that that is what they're doing. So giving you permission to follow the dream, like, you know, your dad making the decision to go back to uni obviously had, even if your mom didn't fully endorse it or whatever, like, she obviously got on board and let him do it and, you know, supported him through it. So I think, you know, the confidence comes from believing in yourself, but that team around you, and inevitably remembering for people like you and me who are like, I can do it by myself, is also to know that you're also, whether you know it or not, on somebody else's team. You're somebody else's Sherpa, and they would not be where they are if you weren't there for them. So I think that's the beautiful thing about running online businesses and having these beautiful communities where we randomly enter people's living rooms that, you know, via Zoom, is that is available to us now. So I think that's a really beautiful part of connection and the ability to believe that you can accept support. Because we hear it all the time, you know, accepting support is the strongest, you know, it's the most vulnerable, it's just, you know, true strength. And so many people, like, I used to believe, like, nah, you know, that's a weakness. Why would you accept help? You know, like, you know, have you really tried everything? Are you sure? So yeah, it's quite fascinating. Sorry, that was a slight slight
No, it's
sideway, but somewhat
no,
related.
it is related. And I think, coming back to this whole bit about having the team around you and being part of somebody else's team is such a beautiful thing to recognize as well. And a
Mm,
lot of us are the ambulance or or the rescuer, and we're on everybody else's team, and
yeah.
then if we don't accept help and have other people on our team, then at some point it'll come unraveled. But
Mm,
coming back to, because you mentioned this at the beginning as well, about having people around you who support your transition in your career.
mm,
So, what happens if people don't have that? And I hear this a lot with people starting online businesses where they'll say, people around me are just not on board. My family, my friends, I think I'm crazy. They don't understand all of those kind of things.
mm.
How do you approach when somebody just doesn't have the support? They're connected with quite a toxic bunch of team members.
Mm. Well, that's a great question, and it happens a lot, and it's that classic thing, right? The 5 people you have around you the most will, largely form, your happiness levels, your income levels, all sorts of things, right? So the 2 things I would say, the 2 things I recommend a lot to clients is, A, choose your quote unquote inner circle for now. So, like I'm sure you've seen Lord of the Rings or The Hobbits, when they sit around the table and they plan the big quest. So I kind of talk to people about a career transition. It's kind of the same. Like you need a couple of people around your table to pack the bags and get all the stuff ready. And they're not going to walk the whole way with you, but they're going to help you with different things. So you could have, people who are really inspiring and stuff like that. Now, if you don't know those people yet, you can have people on your team that you've never met. Like Brene Brown, the famous author and podcaster, is on my team. She'll never know me from a bar of soap. I hope to chat to her one day. But at this point, she's still one of those inspirations around my table because I'm like, she's really inspiring. I'm going to connect with her, listen to her. Someone starting an online business, it might be really cool to look at other influencers that you really gel with, like a Simon Sinek or whomever really inspires you, famous or not. And when you start to have people like that around you, you start to listen to different language. Your belief system about what's possible starts to change in a healthy way. Because let's not, no one's an overnight success. I think we all know that. I think we all know that, true success comes from identifying what true success is for you, not for somebody else. And secondly, repeated effort. That's how we get there. The second really important thing about what you just shared about the toxic people in our life is to use something that I call the bench, and to continue using sports metaphors, right? So a team can be pretty big, but not everyone will play every match. So there are times when you've got someone, let's say hypothetically, you've got a parent who's very critical of your online business idea. First of all, I'd ask myself, do they know anything about the thing you're trying to do? If they genuinely don't, then what the heck are you doing listening to their voice for? Like they love you and they want to protect you, but their love and care is coming out in such a way that's not helpful. So ask yourself, first of all, have they done this? And second of all, is there the form that they're trying to support me right now, is that helpful for me? If it's not actually helpful, because it can be good in some instances to have a devil's advocate to go, hey, have you thought about blah, blah? Or, it sounds like you're doing this, but have you looked at this other angle? But the key there is constructive. The devil's advocate role is only helpful if it's constructive. If it's not constructive and it's just mean, then you utilize the bench. So the bench is, I love you, but I am not going to listen to you. You don't even have to tell them this, by the way. You can just bench them. Like they'll never know what match they're in anyway, so that's fine. So if you have someone in your life that you metaphorically need to go, thank you, I'm going to go send dad or whomever it is in your world, they're going to sit this one out. And I like to use to continue the metaphors, like I kind of feel like advice from people like that is kind of like when you get a really itchy knitted sweater for Christmas, like the really ugly but really uncomfortable Christmas sweater. So advice can be a lot like that, and you can choose to wear it and be really uncomfortable and crappy about it, or you can go, thank you so much for the sweater. It's going to go in the back of my closet for a really long time, and then maybe it'll get donated. They don't need to know that. And if they're like, oh, have you followed my advice? Why are you not wearing the sweater? You can literally go, oh, sorry, it's at home somewhere. Da, da, da. Thank you, though. Thank you. Because in the end of the day, you are the only one who's accountable to you. So whether they go on the bench And simultaneously, because you can't just bench everyone in your life, right? You need to backfill that with some inspiration from elsewhere. But that inspiration does not have to come from people that you know. It can be other people that you just go and follow, go learn about, go to their webinars. Just be around people who believe that it's possible and try it. And if it fails, quote unquote, you have a learning opportunity, then you're fine. Either way, you're moving forward, which is probably better than being stuck. That's my general philosophy.
Yeah. And that's wonderful advice. That's wonderful advice. And I think we've all had an itchy sweater.
Oh, so many itchy sweaters.
And we've all been benched as well. If you think about it, you'd be like, hey, I've been benched a couple times recently. And that might be some good feedback for you as well. But I think what I come across fairly regularly is young people who are kind of being forced into a career. So I want you to be a doctor, or I want you to be a lawyer, or whatever that is. And I've had some personal experience around that. So I think that's why I attract that kind of conversation. And it can be very difficult. They're not even in mid-career. They haven't even started their career yet. They're still studying for their career yet. And it can be a really difficult thing to bench your family, where you do have to say, thanks, but no thanks. That is not what I'm pursuing. I want to be a painter or an actor or whatever, which is miles away from, sciences in that kind of family pressure. But I think, being able to find your own way is an important right, basically, of each of us. And I think when we uphold our rights, when we are aware of our responsibilities to uphold others' rights as well, that's where the itchy sweater comes in. And I'm going to add a layer, if I may.
Yeah, go for it. Please do. The itchy sweater needs company.
So the itchy sweater, I'm sort of thinking, if you really do have to wear the itchy sweater, like you really have to, like they're like, I'm here, I'm in your house, go put it on.
Yeah. Like, where is it? I want to see it.
Because the whole thing of like, yeah, it's at home works if you're not at home.
True.
But if you have to put on the itchy sweater and they're right there, I had a mother-in-law a bit like that, where she'd be in your home going, well, where is it? Go get it. I'd like to see you in it. So then I'm sort of thinking you could always put like a soft t-shirt underneath it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's not touching your skin. It's still there. It's still on the outside. We're still doing the itchy sweater, but we also have something for ourselves that is comfortable and soft and not itchy against our skin. And,
absolutely.
And for me, that's kind of if you really are, or you were maybe, and now you're stuck in that career, and we're back to the beginning of the conversation with all the mortgage and so on. Then it's still about having that, like the soft t-shirt underneath it, to just have that's yours. And whether that's in your personal life or your work life, or wherever you want that t-shirt to be, then that gives you something for you. And so I'm not going to say that you shouldn't go into the field that your family wants you to and all of those kind of things, because that's a very individual decision. But you still need to have the soft t-shirt under the itchy sweater that's just yours.
Absolutely. And you could go as far as well to say, yeah, I'm going to wear the itchy sweater, but I'm going to put another thing over it. I'm going to accessorize it with another hat or something. So like, I'm thinking if you had a family member that was really pushy that you should go into law, I don't know, something, then you could go, that's interesting. Well, if I'm going to go explore law at uni, I might study human rights law. And they're like, no, you should do blah, blah, litigation or something. And you're like, well, there's so many layers, right? So I couldn't possibly pick a field, pick a niche until I've gone and explored and looked at, the other things that's available. So I think it's the danger as well, because I think what you said before is really, really important. Like, we've all been benched. And often, we mean well, right? We provide advice when people come to me and ask about, how do I run an online business? What systems do I need? I'm pretty happy to provide them with a list of what I use. But I'm very often, and I'm learning to bite my tongue sometimes, to be like, well, what specific part of this do you want help with? Or where do you feel you need support and help? And I think specifically to the young listeners out there, or anyone who has a young person in their life going, oh my gosh, have I forced a sweater on them? Have I have I harmed my young one? Then I would just say, look, life is really long, and we have so many different, like, I've changed careers. I studied political science at uni, ended up working in finance, then became an EA working as an executive assistant for high-end corporate, worked in media, ended up in marketing. Like, I have done so many different things from the thing that I thought at uni that I'm definitely going to work in, like, local government back in Sweden. And here I am on the other side of the world running a career coaching business. So to the young people, I would say literally, like, it's going to change most likely a few times. You may stay in the same swimming pool. You know, some people do that. You know, they're like, yeah, I started there, but I'm switching lanes. But for a lot of us, like, we go from the swimming pool to the bloody Mount Everest again, right? So things change and things move and things evolve. So for those who have young ones in your life, let them go out and have that gap year or explore the thing. And if you're a young one who's like, I don't really know where I'm going, and you're probably like, don't call me a young one, I'm old enough to make decisions. You absolutely are. But go try, go play, go explore. And pick something to start with, because you can learn something. Like, even when I worked in finance, which wasn't my favorite field, I had one of the best bosses I've ever had, and I learned to deal with really difficult leaders. So that was my learning, and that was my theme from finance. And I will always treasure that, even though a lot of the tasks weren't stuff that I do now, except maybe some spreadsheets.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't do spreadsheets. It's not part of my structure, and I hear the structure coming out in you, and I admire that, and that's why I always appreciate a conversation with you, because that gives me some food for thought about. Yeah, I should have a little bit more structure. I shouldn't be totally improvising, but I think it's great advice that you triggered a memory for me. My son, who's 26 now, when he graduated with his undergraduate degree, they were all standing there saying, "What are we going to do now?" And my husband had just passed away a few months earlier, and I was going, "I know, right? What are we going to do now?" And the look on their face was kind of like, "What? No, you've got your business. You've got it all figured out. You've got your career." But I was starting all over again in so many ways.
Yeah.
And and then Confidence Through Cabaret wasn't even a concept. And I just think that we look to the young people and say, "Oh, well, you have to decide what you're going to do with your life." You don't have to decide forever, right? That itchy sweater is going to it's going to fall apart eventually, especially if you pick up in that. But yeah, I think, Emmy, I feel like we have a book in us about the itchy sweater. We need to collaborate on.
I feel like we do. Yeah, I've used it before, but you've added another layer, which I love. No pun intended.
I'm all about accessorizing. I'm all about kind of, unpicking some of the threads and see what happens. Yeah, that's the whole thing. So I want to come to, so we talked about confidence, and we talked about failure, and we talked about transition. I want to talk a little bit about Cabaret now. Because, and this is the point when you're like, what? We did not discuss this.
Bring it in. No, I love it.
Okay. All right. So
I actually dance salsa, so I have a little bit of Cabaret in me. A little bit different.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your dancing. What kind of dancing?
Well, I got into Latin dancing when I lived overseas as a connection point to kind of get to know people and stuff like that. So long story short, I walked into a Cuban salsa club in Manchester in the UK, of all places. And this Cuban guy was like, "Do you want to learn to salsa?" I was like, "Sure." And then I started to do lessons. And then that's how I met a lot of friends when I moved to Sydney as well, which was really fun. So I think dancing is, for me at least, and I don't know what it represents for you, it's just a really creative expression and just like flow. Like, when you have good dancing flow, especially in Latin dancing, when you dance with a partner, yeah, it's so much fun. So much fun. I haven't done enough of it recently. Thank you, COVID, but
Yeah. But you still have that, and you can still, put on some music and, play in your kitchen and, however you want to do it. I have no rhythm, and I don't remember choreography or steps. So as a paid professional dancer, that's a weird thing for me to say. And so
I love it.
you're at the opposite end of the spectrum to me. And if you think about our conversation where I've been like, yeah, I got rid of structure, it didn't suit me. You know,
I can
you
see
obviously
why.
you obviously follow the steps. You obviously follow a partner if you're dancing. So I adore that this is another area where we're on
Yeah,
the same spectrum, but in such different places. Okay,
yeah.
so in cabaret you can have a partner. A cabaret for me is performing, but in a small venue. So you can see all of your audience. You can really connect with that energy. It's very different to something being in a huge theater, and
Mm,
you've got thousands of people. You can still perform those same kind of cabaret style, but it is no longer cabaret. It's
mm,
theatrics, effectively.
mm.
And so with cabaret, it's very intimate because you are very much connected. And there's often, some cabaret shows are, they're all burlesque, or they're all drag, or they're all, a thing. They're all aerial or whatever. But I prefer the kind of style where there's a mix, and some are singing and some are dancing and some are
Mm,
doing comedy and all different sorts of things, and a combination of things.
mm,
So if you so and you don't have your salsa partner with you, or your Latin
mhm.
dancing partner with you. So what would you perform if you were performing in cabaret, Emmy?
Oh my gosh.
And you could still do something Latin.
I dare say there would be some Latin rhythms coming out. Interestingly, though, for a salsa dancer, I don't really love choreography either. I think that's why I love Cuban dancing, Cuban salsa, because it's very, you just flow, you just kind of go with it. So I dare say I've been loving the Encanto, the Disney's Encanto rhythms. So if you ask me right now what I would perform, I might do my take on there's, we need to talk about Bruno, or whatever that one's called that everyone's singing. Um, and who knows, maybe I would go and grab myself a partner from the crowd and, co-create something. Who knows? Maybe I'd
Oh,
find Bruno.
I love that. I love that. And I think, I didn't appreciate that Cuban dancing is more kind of free flow.
Much
That's
more free flow. So in salsa specifically, because Cuban dancing or Cuban salsa specifically, and sorry for any Cubans listening who feel like I've totally butchered this dancing, but for me, how I was introduced to it by a Cuban was that it's the flow and the closeness. And there's not a plan, there's a couple of steps that you use to build your flow, but you can mix them however you want. Whereas some of the other styles of salsa can be a lot more showy, a lot more sparkles, if you will. And even though I think it's beautiful and it suits a lot of dancers, it was just not like, I'll never be the dirty dancing lift woman in my dancing.
so there's a huge amount of trust in your partner, right?
Yeah.
Because you're following a partner if you're not leading, or you're leading a
Mm,
partner if you follow.
mm.
It's a very interesting dynamic, because you're giving over that kind of control, or you're accepting that control, and and being in sync with another person is a huge amount of trust.
It is, and it's funny as well because I think it's something that's really helpful to be reminded of. And for me, dancing, because I grew up dancing, like folk dancing and ballroom dancing and all sorts of different things. Like my family was always quite musical, and we either got the dancing gene or the musical gene, and I got the dancing gene, so that's fine. But I remember when I was younger, I would often try to steer the guy and like almost like show the guy where he needed to go and kind of make him look good. And funnily enough, I think early on in my corporate life, it was a little bit like that as well. You kind of steer the people to make them look good. And I think in the end of the day, and I think confidence comes down to this a lot, is that you've got to trust at some point, because if you fight, first of all, pick someone who doesn't seem like a jerk, pick someone who seems nice enough to spend the dancing time with. And secondly, just trust. And it's funny because it's almost like muscle memory, because if you know how to trust in some instances, like I know how to trust a good dance partner, then I can transfer that into other areas as well, including trusting my judgment, right? Because picking a job or picking your professional career or picking a lane of the next step you're going to go down, It's very similar to that. And it was funny because I hadn't danced salsa. I can't believe we're talking about this. This is so funny. I hadn't danced salsa for years. And then I think it was in December time, a few friends of mine, we went out for drinks for the first time in ages. You know, things had eased up a little bit. And we stumbled on this salsa dancing class. And, you know, at the bar that we were at, totally random in central Melbourne. And the guy at the front who was instructing the class, it took him a minute or two, and he's like, "Hey, you there? Can you come up here? I want you to show some things with me." And it was so funny because this lady, she was like, "You know her. This is all planted." No, 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 no. And she got all actually got upset because he showed a couple of moves, and he's like, "No, no, no. The reason this is working is because A, she knows the basic rhythm, and B, she trusts me." And it was a really interesting experience. And my friends who know that I dance, but they haven't seen me dance before, they were like, "What just happened?" And it was a beautiful learning moment, like you said, about the trust piece, because you have to trust that the other person is not going to harm you, and they're not going to make you look foolish, and they're not there to make you a failure. They're there to have a good time, you know, and connect.
Exactly.
And I think it translates into many other areas in life too, but yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I mean, that's for me, that's where the confidence through cabaret comes in. A lot of times people think, oh, we're going to learn how to do cabaret. And yeah, I do workshops on, you know, on the website, and, you know, and I'm always happy to do a glove peel of things, because I think it's important to feel good in our bodies. And, but it is an analogy to life. And so for me, that the performance is an analogy to so many things. And I love that you've shared that trusting, because that's what we've been talking about, right? Is you know, having the people around you that you trust. I'll tell you what, Emmy, I'm going to read your blog post for like the next 6 months, because I feel like the material in this is just like we're just pulling out all kinds of stuff. It's fabulous. Okay, so you're there, you're going to perform, you might pull somebody up from the audience if you can find somebody that connects with that trust. What one prop would you want with you?
I'm picturing some kind of like an armchair, like something like, I don't know why, but I got this, I'm very visual, and I got this visual of like a really old school but beautiful chair, like maybe some like velvety action or something. I don't know. Like to have like something to work the moves around. Yeah. Not sure why, but there you go. I go with instinct on these things.
But that's fabulous, because you can make so many shapes with it. You could put a person on it. You can be on it. You got fun.
Yeah. And it's like sturdier than, you know, like one of those small chairs. So yeah, I think something sturdy.
Yeah. Trust me, I have danced on many folding chairs, and if you put your hand in the wrong place, it will fold with your weight on it. So I love that you've thought this through very practically, but also the deliciousness of the velvet. It's just I don't know, I'm picturing dark red velvet. I don't know why. For you.
Yeah, I'm kind of like the dark red or a deep pink, or some kind of nice. Ironically feminine colors. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, and so you're about to perform this Latin salsa piece that may have a partner. You've got your velvet chair, and you're about to go on stage. What is your stage name? They're going to say, "Please welcome to the stage."
The name that comes to mind is Priscilla, which is really funny because I saw Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, not long ago. So I don't know if that's why it's coming to me, but yeah, I'm going to go with Priscilla then. Priscilla will be my stage name.
I love that because, you know, I mean, if you take Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is a fabulous movie anyway, but there's a huge amount about, you know, kind of when you talk about drag and you talk about performing, there is a facade. Right. And that facade is kind of what you're creating and the illusion that you're creating. And there's an anonymity to it as well, that you get to preserve the parts that you don't choose to share with your audience. But then there's, you know, if you come back to the movie, then there's a whole thing about being authentic and expressing yourself for who you truly are. So I
Yeah.
love Priscilla for you. That's
Yeah.
fabulous.
I'll roll with Priscilla for this performance. Yeah.
Well, and so I talk a lot about using that stage name, and that may change for you, but using that stage name as a very different voice to the ones that we've been talking about with what I call the imposter voice. That one, who are you to do this, or the soloist, or all these different inner critics that we have in our heads. Is to being able to say, I'm Priscilla, damn it, I'm doing this. Like, I am fearless, fierce, powerful, and strong.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that voice, whatever you want to call that voice, very often people will say, oh, I can't call myself, Queen Priscilla, because that's too, that would be too egotistical. And it's not. If that's what it is, if there's a queen or a whatever, whatever that voice is being able to talk to that voice when you need that confidence or momentum or inner power to come out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. And I think, all the voices that we all have different voices in our mind that come in and control things for us, whether we like to admit it or not. And we spend a lot of time listening to those voices. So I love what you're saying to actually reclaim it. And I work with clients in a similar way to, when that thing comes up for you, or when you have a belief come up about what you're able to do or not do, how would you like to respond instead? And then quite often people will go, oh, well, I don't want to do, or I don't want to say, or I don't want to attract, blah, blah. And I'm like, great. So what would you like instead? What does that look like? What's the other side of that? And I love what you're saying about the Priscilla in my case, or for whatever it is for somebody else. You have that in you already. So when it comes to the whole confidence piece, it's more around not projecting what other people think of Priscilla or whatever that is for them, and literally just going, well, Priscilla and I, we're gonna dance. And if I think Brene Brown says this beautifully, it's that whole, if you're not in the arena dancing, or if you're not willing to go on stage yourself, I'm not going to listen to your advice. Because if you're not willing to be that person for yourself, why should I take your advice on this? And we all hurt, we all have pain, we all have stuff. And we all have, like you say, we all have a Priscilla that needs to come out and dance. And I wish for my biggest passion, and the reason I do what I do, is I hate to see people waste years and years and years of their life not leaning into what they really want. Makes me very sad. So that's why I'm like, we can do better. More Priscilla.
Yeah. And that's why you do what you do.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's why the bridge coaching is born.
Yeah.
Oh, Emmy, I've loved this conversation. We could talk for hours, really.
It's been fabulous.
And we will. Where can people find you?
So the best way is to head over to thebridgecoaching.com.au, all one word. So thebridgecoaching.com.au. You can either book a free chat with me. I have clients all over the world, which is the beauty of, this new global way of working we talked about earlier. And I'm also on most of the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, etc. But the website is a great place to start. We can put that in the show notes if you like as well.
Yeah. Please do send me your links. Just if you're listening to this on podcast, you should, pardon me, you should know that we also have a video version on Confidence Through Cabaret YouTube channel. Check out the Vodcast playlist and you'll find Emmy and I. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you can also listen on audio anywhere you get your podcast is Confidence Through Cabaret. So Emmy Petersson is EMMY. As it sounds, and I'm just trying to read the screen because
Emmy, like the Emmy Award, and then Petersson, Petersson. It's the Scandinavian double S that everyone goes, what's that about? I'm like,
that's why I was like glaring at the screen. I'm like, glasses on. Is that two S's or am I just like fully hallucinating? So so two S's in Peter's son. So it's all one word, Peterson.
Right.
And the bridge coaching. So go and check out Emmy's work. You also have a YouTube channel.
Yes, I do.
Which is called?
It's just The Bridge Coaching on YouTube as well. And yeah, if you head to the website, you will find, I'll send you all the links, Heather, and you can put them up if you like. But
Yes.
on the bottom of the website, thebridgecoaching.com.au, you have all the social links there at the bottom. But I do have a fair bit of videos on all sorts of things relating to career or things like that as well. So yeah, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you
It
so much
really
for having me. It's been like we could talk for ages.
and it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's all organic. You know, we
Yeah.
didn't plan any of it. We kind of had a starting point, and then off we've gone in several
Mm,
directions. And now we're collaborating on a book about the itchy sweater. So
totally.
there's
Totally love it. The layers, the things, the hat. It's going to be great. What an
absolutely,
ensemble.
absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. It is such a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to have you. And I have no doubt that, in fact, I would love to have a conversation again, you know, once, because you've transitioned into the bridge coaching full time now. And then
Mm.
I would love to be able to have you back and catch up with you and talk more as your uh, business expands and takes over the world.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. I'm sure it's going to change shapes many times, just like most career transitions do as well. So yeah, no, I'd absolutely love that. It's been such a privilege to be here, and I hope that the people listening got some good value out of it. And yeah, go out and play,
Yeah.
unleash your Priscillas.
Oh, absolutely. Go out and play all day.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you again, Emmy. It
Thank
just
you.
remains for me to say that you can connect with us. Emmy's details will be in the show notes. We are Confidence Through Cabaret on all of the socials except for Twitter. We are at YBYWYS. I am on Clubhouse at Heather YBYWYS. And those 6 beautiful little letters stand for it is your body and it is your world and it is your stage. Take up space unapologetically and own it. It feels so good. Thank you for being here. Bye for
Thank
now.
you.